Hello, everybody. I'd like to welcome back to the podcast my dad, Eugene. Say hello, Eugene.
Hello, Eugene.
and I'm also with Paul Merton as well. So thank you so much for coming on, Paul.
Thank you. Hello, Eugene. Hello, Spencer. How are you?
Yeah, good. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
No. Thank you for coming. We couldn't think of a better guest, to be honest.
Really?
Yeah.
How much time did you devote to that particular practice?
You're the first one that came to mind by
but
far.
that's good. Thank you.
Actually, we're in the London Hippodrome, which my grandfather performed in the early 1900s. Cinderella apparently was one of the first productions here.
Right, yes, because it's a Frank Matcham theatre, isn't it?
Yes.
Who was, for those who don't know the name, he designed some of the best theatres in Britain, the Palladium amongst them. And when you play a Frank Matcham theatre, there's another one in Buxton.
Okay.
They're beautiful. They're sort of when an audience comes into a theatre, if they feel they're coming somewhere special, they're already in a different frame of mind. You know, they're in a sort of like, oh, this is this is a treat. This is something special. And you always get that with a Frank Matcham theatre, and they're so well designed that particularly the Palladium, you can be standing on stage at the Palladium. It's like 2,400 people, and yet right at the very top, they don't feel that far away. You almost feel like you could shake hands with them. You know, it's beautiful. It's both big and intimate at the same time.
Yeah. So apparently in this Hippodrome Theatre, back in the day, they had this huge tank in the middle. And it was a huge sort of swimming pool. And they had, because it used to be a circus as well. Mm-hmm. And they had all sorts of animals. They had elephants, tigers, God knows what in the tank. So I think that time my grandfather was here, they had this huge tank.
Yes, but spectacle was, and I suppose this would slightly predate cinema. So if you wanted to see spectacle, it wasn't on a screen; it was in reality. The Coliseum Theatre, which is just down the road, is again. I think they had a sort of like a huge revolving stage which horses could run around on. You know, so I mean, it was, or they'd gallop in the same place.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Very strange, but if you wanted to see spectacle, that was come to these big theatres in London.
Okay, so looking at my notes here, it says Chaplin played the role of Lame Limbs character, a slapstick role that helped develop his signature style. It was for Cinderella, which I think was one of his earliest performances. I think he was with Fred Carnot's troupe at the time as well.
Right. Yes. Well, panto is a sort of a long-running tradition in Britain. It doesn't export to other countries. And I think when I've played a couple of pantos, and sometimes an American in the audience will look very puzzled as to what the hell is going on, because you know there's a man dressed as a woman, there's a woman dressed as a man, there's no plot.
No, exactly.
Somebody comes on and sings a song that was a hit 5 years ago. But it's a great, and I don't know whether your grandfather had this at the time, but you have a sort of license to improvise a little bit in panto, which you don't have obviously in a play. You can't do that, but there's audience interaction, there's songs, there's somebody happens in the audience, you can ad lib something like that, and that's allowed, providing you sort of, some of the other actors get a little bit nervous, but providing you give them the cue line in the end, they're okay with it,
Yeah. And because he played a cat, and apparently one of the things was he used to play a cat, and then one of the clowns, I forget his name, I'll put it in this video, he would fall over him. And each night that would happen, apparently he would always hurt himself, so he'd tell my granddad off for not being at the right height to trip over. So yeah. And another reason, well, the main reason we're here is to talk about, because it's the 100-year anniversary of the Gold Rush, which actually a lot of my guests on this podcast have said is their favorite Chaplin film, interestingly. It's not my favorite one, personally.
Well, Charlie himself at one point said it was his favourite. He's always said it was the film he wanted to be remembered by. There's a quote somewhere.
Well, he always loved the last film he worked on.
Yes.
Oh, is that true?
Well, because he was so emotionally involved with mainly composing music or whatever. But for sure, it was his first big feature film. They actually built a whole mountain range behind the studio, so people could see from miles around. And I don't know how many tons of salt and tons.
I've got it here. So apparently it consisted of 200 tons of plaster, 285 tons of salt, and 100 barrels of flour. And there was 600 extras. for that scene going up the mountain.
Because initially, of course, it was filmed. They decided to film on location, didn't they?
Yes.
Hence that shot you're talking about right at the beginning of the film, where you have the huge crowd of extras in a line just disappearing into the distance. But I think winter conditions were quite harsh, and
exactly,
and it was in the end easier to recreate the scenes in a studio than it would be on location.
Apparently, it was the set, because it was so big and massive. It was in the Californian summer, and it became sort of like a sightseeing thing for tourists.
Right, and at this point of his career as well, he had made The Kid, which was a film which as you know, took quite a while to make. That was a huge success. Then he made 2 or 3 extra sort of 2-reelers to fulfil his contract. And then his first film for United Artists was this film, a brilliant film, but a very dramatic film, A Woman of Paris.
Yes.
Which was a critical smash. I think Buster Keaton talked about saying, he said that every director in Hollywood went to see this film because it just... its portrayal of characters was so advanced. So the villain wasn't just a villain; there was also a good side to the villain. They weren't just black and white characters. They weren't just sort of they were 2-dimensional. But the audiences apparently didn't go for it particularly because it was a Chaplin film without him in it. So the Gold Rush, in some respects, is sort of like maybe, is it too much to say it's a bit of a comeback for him in terms of the 1920s, because the other comedians that were making films at the time were making 2 features a year.
Yeah.
His rate of work slowed down a bit, reasons of perfectionism and stuff, and it paid off because the films still stand up brilliantly. But do you think would he have felt any pressure about the Gold Rush coming out? Would he have felt that this has got to be a good one?
Well, I'm sure I know he felt the pressure for every film he made and came out, because he really wanted it to be a success. Well, at least to have a majority of people liking it. So it must have been, well, especially having such a big production for it.
And it is, I saw it, there was a screening recently at the Royal College of Music a couple of months ago. And in some respects, it's almost like a greatest hits film, and that there are so many good bits in it.
Yeah.
Like the dance, the bread rolls, the scene with the cabin that's on a slant, and and the stuff where he's a chicken.
That's one of my favorite bits in the whole film.
It's an incredible film that sort of like you could almost take bits out of it and use it as a compilation of the best of Chaplin. In fact,
so
it's all
true.
in one film. It is extraordinary.
No, it's funny because the scene where he eats his shoe. We always asked him, how did you do that? And he said it was made out of licorice. But licorice is known, if you have too much of it, you have dysentery.
Yes.
So after about 60 takes of eating licorice, they were in big trouble. After.
Yes. Because he was he was known for doing a lot of takes, wasn't he? And when you look at some of the outtakes that exist, it's very difficult to see the difference between take 1 and take 10, but there's something that he's seeing that he's not happy with.
Exactly. No, exactly. And the funny thing is you see Big Jim, who was in the cabin with him, when my father is eating the shoelaces like spaghetti and stuff like that, you can see on his face, he's really trying to stay serious.
Yes.
He's trying not to laugh.
I'm
know.
I looked that up. But it did say that he, talking about Woman of Paris, apparently he started building the set pretty much 2 months after the premiere of Woman of Paris.
Right.
So they do think that was because possibly he felt the pressure, like as you say, which is kind of interesting.
Well, I suppose he had sort of like, I mean, it was, and it's just about to be released again, isn't it, on Blu-ray? I've got my copy's arriving in a couple of days, I think. It's a film well worth exploring and well worth looking at because of the there's a marvellous bit in it where an Edna Purviance, who he, starred in all the early films with, it's her dramatic role, and there's a bit where she's looking at a newspaper item about her lover who's seeing somebody else, and her face is saying, "Oh, it doesn't matter. I don't care. Nothing means nothing to me." But her hand is sort of like tapping out a cigarette like this. So her hand is telling you one thing, and her face is telling you another.
Yeah.
And that was very sophisticated for its day. That was something where, just because she's smiling, it doesn't mean that's her real emotion.
Yeah.
And as well, I think there's a scene where the train arrives at the station, which was a new way of doing it. Then hiring a train and having a train coming. He did it all with shadows.
Yes, and flickering lights and so you can see it's a train, but you never see the train.
No, exactly. Yeah.
If you look at any of these guys, like even the Beatles, anyone that has longevity, they've always pushed the boundaries and they've always done something completely different to the last. So, I mean, he made many films, so the fact that this one didn't do so well, I mean...
you can see how it might have sort of pricked his pride a little bit and thinking, well, okay, all right, let's...
Well, the thing is, I think, being a comic and suddenly doing something more of a more serious film, the public wasn't ready to accept that.
Yes, that's right. And quite often, I mean, A Woman of Paris is a real exception because it is a great film. Quite often when comedians try to be serious, it turns out pretty bad.
Yes, it's so true, because you don't see them in that light.
The Jerry Lewis is one that comes to mind. Sort of like sometimes it's sort of like the skill that you have as a comedian, as a film comedian, is something you then put aside to do something else. But his storytelling abilities were so strong that it stands up as a remarkable film. It really is worth exploring.
But the same kind of thing happened again with the Countess from Hong Kong.
Yes.
Where he did this, and the public received it really badly. But now everyone fights for it because they want to see Marlon Brando and Sophia Loren together.
Well, I think as well, it's sort of like if you don't say this is a Charlie Chaplin film, if you just watch it as a film, it stands up really well. I mean, I watched it maybe 5 or 6 years ago with a certain amount of trepidation. I'd seen it on television a long time ago, and I was thinking, well, is it going to be that bad? And it's not at all. And some of the comments, the critical comments, were patronising in the extreme. I think sometimes, I won't say often, but critics sometimes like, okay, Charlie Chaplin's this great filmmaker. Okay, that's not news. We all know that.
Sure.
This film's no good, we'll say. But that's and of course, so that became the story. But of course, it's much, when somebody says it's the worst film he's ever made, well, I could draw your attention to several Keystone films that were made in 2 days that aren't as good. I mean, I think it's that was a strange. And there was another comment that said, he's in his 70s. He's never shot in Technicolor. Oh, come on. I mean, this man was a master of cinema. He's not really thrown by the fact that he's shooting in Technicolor. He knows what that is.
And I think as well when you're that famous and stuff, and he already had a lot of bad press early on in his career. People just probably, they jump on the bandwagon.
This is it. And you mentioned the Beatles earlier. When the Beatles brought out Magical Mystery Tour, it got absolutely slammed because it was the first time that they did something which was less than brilliant in some people's eyes. Yeah. If you look at it now, like a woman, like a Countess in Hong Kong, it stands up. It's not a bad film by any means.
Well, to a certain extent, The King of New York as well.
Yes.
Because it was so politically minded. Well, it was his response for being thrown out.
If he was alive today, do you think he'd be making a film about Trump?
That's a good question.
I don't know, yeah.
But
what would he make a film about? That's the thing. Would he be as outspoken as he would have been back then? Or because obviously times have changed, people are a bit more sensitive.
Yes, well, there is that, isn't there? I mean, if you go back to, I suppose, the first film of his career, The Shoulder Arms, is the one where you sort of nobody else would have dared to have made a comedy about the First World War while it was still going on.
True.
And then The Great Dictator, of course, was the brilliant piece of bravado to when people in Hollywood were saying, "Oh no, don't upset the Germans. We send a lot of films there." But history proved him right.
Yeah.
But if you look at The Great Dictator, and you see the guy who plays Mussolini.
Yes.
He's he's the double of Donald Trump, or Donald Trump is the double of him.
Yes.
The way he stands up, his way of keeping his face always up and walking. And
I know.
I think it would be to make a film about Trump as powerful as the film was about Hitler would probably be difficult.
Yeah.
But if you're making it with your own money, as he is,
well, it'd be terrible statements to say.
I was talking to Simon Pegg, and we're talking about Blazing Saddles.
Yes.
And there's a part in there where there's Mel Brooks plays the mayor.
Yes.
And he's there and he's just signing documents and he's like, "That's exactly Trump."
Yes. yes.
No, it's funny, but yeah, what he would make a film about now, my granddad, I have no idea.
Well, a follow-up to The Tramp would be The Trump, wouldn't it?
Exactly.
Well, who knows? Who knows what he'd be doing? But it'd be a fascination. If he was still around doing.
Or maybe you'd do Modern Times too.
Yeah.
Yes, that's a film ahead of its time. Incredibly, the whole factory system and
the machine and the man.
Yes, artificial intelligence, the dehumanization of humankind against the machine. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So if the Gold Rush, as Dad you say, was at the time probably his most proud achievement, how comes you went and made a second edit of the film?
I think, sound came and the talkies were there, and I guess it was his own way of trying out a new way of presenting the film. Well, he changed the end of The Gold Rush,
which no one seems to really know why. From what
I don't know.
From what I've do you know? Would you know why? Or
maybe. I mean, I don't know. It's a tiny little edit, and you don't really see what the problem would be to keep it as it was.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe he'd run out of music. 15 seconds too short. Oh, it doesn't matter.
It's interesting when you watch the newer version, because obviously it's got his score in it, because he went back to rescore everything. And then he takes away the subtitles, doesn't he? And then he narrates the film, which is kind of interesting, because hearing him narrate that whole film is a different approach.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's sort of like, The Great Dictator was his biggest box office success, his first real talkie. And to capitalise on that success, given how long it took him to make films, then he thought, look at The Gold Rush, well, if I can adapt that for sound, as we say, and put narration into it, and it was a big success when it came out because it hadn't been seen for nearly 20 years. And in those days, you couldn't look on a computer and see it. You just had to rely on your memory of it. If that worked, then there was a possibility to sort of like revisit other films. I think there was some talk at the time of scoring The Circus, but he didn't get around to that for several years until the 60s, did he? And I think it was just a way of sort of like, well, talkies have come in, sounds come in. I was dead against it, but it's definitely there. It's going to stay. So all this work that I've done, which is either going to become obsolete, you might think, or I can put it forward for a new generation. So I suppose that was, obviously I'm just speculating here, but that might have been some of the reason behind reissuing it as a new version.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, he never did it again. He just said it to me, it was like a tryout. Yeah. Kind of thing.
So the film as well, which I find interesting, so it took a year and a half to make, almost 2 years. Production had to shut down for 3 months because Lita Gray was pregnant. So there's a lot of controversy around that.
Yes, yeah. I mean,
Well, it was cold outside.
So scenes had to be reshot, but then that wasn't an unusual thing for Charlie, was it? In the sort of latter years, City Lights was reshot with the drunk millionaire. Was a different actor originally. And if you are making a film with your own money, which in the history of the movies, I can't think of anyone else that's ever done that. And he could afford to do it because it was his money that he was spending.
Yeah.
So there was no producers saying hurry up. That approach is a bold approach, but it does pay off because the films that we have are masterpieces. So you can't argue with the approach of it.
It's funny because when you think about it, at the beginning of his career, didn't he record like 2-3 films a week?
Oh,
with the Keystones,
yeah.
Yeah,
sure. You could shoot a film in an afternoon,
Yeah.
and they would do. They would when very little budget. So if there was a parade going through town, a parade of policemen or something, you just put your actors in front of the policemen walking past. And they became part of your movie.
That's right.
And then, premiered on the 26th of June, 1925, at Hollywood's newest wonder theater, Grauman's Egyptian Theater. So.
There is. Are you aware of there's a short film that was made by a guy who I think ended up working for Charlie called Carter to Haven, where you have. It's called. What's it called? It was. I can't remember what it's called. It might be called Shooting Stars. It might be called that. But it was basically it was shot at Douglas Fairbanks' house, and it's a gift for Charlie. So you've got Buster Keaton's in it, Harold Lloyd's in it, Arbuckle's in it, all sort of saluting towards the camera and essentially saying, this is a present for you for the opening of the Gold Rush or whatever. And it's a good film. It's a good little. They sort of
I've heard about this. I haven't seen it.
No, they sort of Carter to Haven I think he was a stage magician, and he's got a trunk, and he opens up the lid of the trunk, he ruffles his hair, disappears behind the trunk. There's a cut, and up comes Buster Keaton. That's him as Buster Keaton, and then he goes back down again. And then up comes Harold Lloyd, and Arbuckle, and Rudolph Valentino's in it. I mean, all the big stars of Hollywood are in it. I think Fairbanks is in it as well in his Robin Hood costume. I think he is, yeah. Okay. And that was done as a kind of sort of good luck for your premiere.
So have you seen that?
No.
It's one of the. It might be on one of the discs as an extra.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think so.
So with the family here, would the Office have that?
Yeah, I mean,
The Office, I doubt it, but
it's on. I can't.
I'll ask
remember.
Arnold.
It's on one. It's on one of the DVDs.
I'll show it.
It might even be on the. It might even be on the Gold Rush disc. I can't remember, but that would make sense of it to be on that one. But it's readily available.
Okay, so this year, 100-year anniversary, is being restored in Italy as we speak, and they're trying to make it the clearest, the best restoration that's ever been done to a Chaplin film, which should be interesting. So there's talk about maybe using AI not to recreate film, but to kind of clean off parts of dust.
It's
and stuff.
extraordinary what they can do these days.
Yeah.
Absolutely incredible. That sort of just in the last 10 years, the leaps and bounds that have been made. You look at something like The Kid, for example, and it looks like it could have been shot this morning. I mean, the picture quality is just astonishing, and you're seeing things which. Audiences saw in 1921, but then after, every time in those days, every time a film was put through the projector, it not disintegrated, but it picked up a little bit of damage. There might be some scratches or tram lines on it or whatever. Well, I'd love to see that because the Gold Rush I saw the other week at the Royal College of Music. I mean, it was a good print, but it could certainly do with if it can be sort of polished up, that would be great.
No, I think they're doing it this. It'll
be
out this year, right?
Is that for Pordenone?
Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah.
Well, brilliant. Oh, I'll be in the queue for that. Definitely.
And Dad, how do you feel about the whole AI thing?
If it's used to fix things, why not?
As long as it's not recreating or you're replacing.
You can't redo a sequence or create or put something in that wasn't there.
Yeah.
What you have to, you're just removing dust and damage.
As much as they don't use it to put it in 3D.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Have you ever had a request to put all the Chaplin films in color or something, or remake them? Of course,
it's been asked so many times, but we're dead against it. Saying we as a family.
I don't think you can really. I mean, it was sort of like it's. sometimes, you sort of like you see something. If like, for example, the very first appearance of the tram that people saw was the Kid Auto Races at Venice.
Yeah.
Now, that was all shot outdoors.
Yes.
So that the way that Peter Jackson did the
Beatles.
The Beatles. And no, I was thinking about the World War I thing. They shall not grow old. There is something about colour which brings you straight into it. So I'd have to say, there's a film that's shot outdoors. I wouldn't mind seeing that 7-minute film in colour. But I do get the point that you can't colorise a film that was originally shot in black and white. You really
especially
can't do that.
he thought of the story and everything in black and white.
Yes, and sometimes interior stuff, so the lighting might be for black and white, but it won't be for colour necessarily. And
well, it's like the shock when we found my Uncle Sidney's film of The Great Dictator, where suddenly we saw that the soldiers were wearing red pants.
Yes, yes.
Red trousers and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it's amazing because he was thinking in black and white and to see the...
And so how does red photograph in black and white, So, I mean, because then if you said, OK, we're going to... But there's no need to colorise this stuff. I mean, people just have to make the,
I think
the leap
it's a
towards
question of
watching the black and white.
education,
Yeah.
You have to educate the people to accept the fact there's black and white films.
Yeah, and it's. I mean, I'm a family member. I remember, when this was 40 years ago, Citizen Kane was on television, and I said, you should watch this film. It's a great film. Oh, it's in black and white.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, okay, but well, if you said colorization, the next question would be, can we put sound on it? Can we put dialogue into it?
Exactly.
That'd be the next thing.
Can he talk?
Well, I think a lot of these silent movie stars, which is kind of funny as well, is a lot of them were huge during the silent era, and as soon as they started speaking, it was kind of like they didn't really have the voice for it.
Well, you do sort of yeah, that's true. I mean, and also in comedy as well, you lost a sort of certain thing where you can slow down the pace of the camera so that when it's projected, it's got a little bit more zip, not really fast. But I mean, there's moments in the Gold Rush where it's sort of undercranked a little bit, so that when you're watching it at whatever it is, 18 frames a second, it's a bit of zip to it. Not every scene, of course.
No.
There were some comedians or some comedies in the mid-20s, the Max Sennett stuff, which was all fast-paced. Everything's going so quick. It's very cartoony. But once you get into sound, it's not so easy to do. So you can lose that sort of sense of zip, and also in sound as well. You're stuck with the. I mean, for example, you see a Marx Brothers film, and sometimes you miss some of Groucho's lines because you're laughing at the last one.
Yeah.
And there's no way you can time that. If Laurel and Hardy Stan Laurel tried to do this with the early Laurel and Hardy films, and he said at a later date they seem so slow now because they edited them with a cinema audience in mind. So he says something, pause, look at Ollie reacting, pause, come back, next line. Without that audience reaction, it seems incredibly slow. But in silent film, in silent comedy, you don't need to pause. You can laugh through the action.
Yeah, I see what
you
mean.
So you're thinking of all those action sequences in the Gold Rush, the slide in of the cabin floor, the fight with the rifle where Charlie's trying to get out of the way. You don't have to cut to any facial reactions of anybody. Sure. You just watch the scene. Mm-hmm. You watch the action unfold, and that for my money makes it funnier than a sound version of that scene would be.
As a comedian yourself.
They're very kind. Did you look me up on Wikipedia?
Yeah. Comedian.
Yeah, I wrote that.
Did you write your own Wikipedia page?
Yeah, absolutely.
So obviously timing is everything, they say, as a comedian.
Yeah.
Do you think that applies to silent comedy as well?
Oh, yeah, totally, yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure that if Charlie had the means of videotaping what he was doing, he would have done a scene and gone straight back and looked at the screen and gone back and did it again. Whereas he didn't have the advantage of that, of course. He would look at stuff the next day in the rushes and see, did I get that right? Was that the right thing to do? Did he come in through the door too late? Was it too early? Yeah, it is all about timing, of course. And this is where you sort of... The moment in Easy Street where he's hitting Eric Campbell on the head with a truncheon. Mm-hmm. It's so beautifully done where Eric Campbell just turns his head to one side, he hits him on that side, turns his head to the other side, hits him on that side. And each tap is slightly more tentative than the previous one.
Yeah.
And that's just beautifully done. There's a time in there between those two, which is just, it's wonderful. It's choreographed beautifully. And, Charlie had a lot of experience as a live comic before he ever got into movies, of course, with the Fred Karno troupe. So he knew about timing, he knew about audience reaction, and once you've had that experience, you never really lose it. You know, you can look at something and say, okay, that's a laugh there, that's gonna last that long, and then there's another laugh coming in here. And sometimes it has to be guesswork, because that's the great thing about comedy, is it's not a science. You know, you can say, well, why does that work? Why is that funny? It just is. There's no point in analysing. You can't pull it to bits. You can't say, well, this is going to work because of that and because of that.
Yeah,
whatever. You can have instinct, you can have thoughts, you can have ideas based on experience, but in the end, you can still shoot a scene that doesn't work and you don't know why.
Yeah.
But I think as well, silent movies is pantomime. So it's expression of the body. So while now with speech, it's different. It's the speech which is funny, not the...
That's right.
That's very true. I mean, you still have some comedians now.
Sure.
That are very physical, you know.
Physical comedy is funny. You know, I don't know.
Lee Evans.
Yeah, exactly. I've got a theory about why we find sort of slapstick funny. And this can't be proved one way or the other. But you know, when we see somebody falling over, and we you know, and it has to be somebody. It can't be an old woman falling over. It has to be somebody who has dignity, who loses their dignity by falling over. And I wonder, going back to caveman days, when you know, we were all crawling around on all fours, and somebody sort of said, "Hey, hang on a minute, I'm gonna stand up. I'm gonna walk on two legs." And they start walking on two legs, and then fall over because, hey, look at him.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah.
So there's a sort of there's something that we find very amusing. It goes back a long, long way of just people falling over or being funny or having indignity sort of thrust upon them, you know?
It reminds people almost of being a child, I think, when you see that silly kind of people, like you say, people falling over or something.
Well,
silly.
children love adults doing silly things because it upsets the normal order, doesn't it? You know?
yeah, completely.
You know, the parent or the adult is saying, "No, don't do that. Behave yourself. Don't be silly. Don't whatever." And then you see the adult doing it.
Yeah.
And that was one of my first memories, if not my first memory of seeing adults do that, was going to the circus. Bertram Mills used to have a circus at Olympia. Well, maybe about 4 or something like that. I was very young. And there was circuses were very big in this country after the war. So this would be early 60s, I suppose. And there must have been like 1,000 people there. And the clowns came on, and I was just hooked on these guys. You know, there was Coco the Clown was a clown at the time. He was a very famous clown. His hair used to go up at the side, ginger hair,
right.
Big sort of ginger suit. They had a car on and the doors fell off it. And they had buckets of water which they threw into the audience, which then had confetti in them. And you thought you were going to get soaked. And the sound of 1,000 people laughing, it was just, at that very moment, whatever age I was, and I was pretty young, I remember thinking, I want to be part of that. Even if I'm just the man who comes on and gives somebody a bucket of water, I want to be part of that effect that you're having on all these people. And it struck, and that's from that moment on.
Yeah.
And my first memory of your dad, I think it must have been one of the Robert Youngson films, like when comedy was king, being shown on the BBC.
Oh, right.
And my grandfather and my dad said that he was once known as the funniest man in the world. I mean, just looking at this character on screen and being fascinated with the funniest man in the world and being fascinated by that. And gradually, as you know, I got into my teens, I started collecting the films you could get on Standard 8 and Super 8 and stuff. But the seed was planted on that day at the circus.
How funny. Similar to you, no? I mean, you used to go you love the circus.
Circus clowns is the old tradition of, you have the white clown, which is the serious, and then you have the others,
which
the Auguste, who come and do all the silly things.
It's the dignity thing again,
exactly.
the authority figure.
And
so true.
Daring to do what you're not supposed to.
Yes, the naughtiness.
Yes, exactly. It's like when my father in The Immigrant, there's a point where they're all stuck on the boat. Yeah. And the guy comes, my father goes behind the policeman, gives him a kick in the butt. And that's how dare we.
And there's an extraordinary moment there where they sort of like he's looking at the Statue of Liberty, and then they all get corralled with this rope.
That's right.
And then he just looks back over the horizon to see if he can still see the Statue of Liberty. I mean, that's an incredibly bold joke.
Yeah,
for its
completely.
day. And there's no other comedian in those days who would even have attempted to do something like that, particularly an American. But that was such an astute and, what a social commentary. It hasn't dated one iota. It's as true now as it ever was.
Yeah, completely.
The land of liberty.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, no, it's so
maybe.
true.
Yeah.
So true. I always thought, because now the Great Dictator can be shown with live orchestra. So I always figured that would actually be a really good one now to start. I think a lot of people would go and watch it because of what's going on,
Yeah, I mean, and Charlie was sort of like, he always started his films off with a very funny sequence. Some other comics didn't do that. They wanted to sort of save the laughs for later. But if you think of The Great Dictator with the Hitler parody speech,
stopping the clapping with the he waves his hand and everyone just stops.
Yes, brilliant. The Gold Rush starts off with, you have a little dramatic scene at the top, but then you have him sort of like walking along the mountain ledge with the bear right behind him. So it's straight into comedy. It's and city lights, of course, on the
statue.
So there are big moments early on in all his later films.
He captures the public attention like that.
Yes, absolutely. And
so true.
It's sort
before
of like
they fall asleep and waiting for the next.
Yes, yeah.
So can we talk about quickly like do you have a favorite scene or anything in the Gold Rush?
Favorite scene?
Yeah, like do you have a favorite?
There's several.
I know there's so many. Like you were saying, there's so many iconic scenes in it.
Yes, yeah.
But I guess it's the shoe one really.
Yeah, the shoe is so good.
Imagination of eating a shoe and pretending it's spaghetti with the laces and the wishbone with the nail.
Yes, it's a brilliant. And of course, this was a man who knew starvation in his early days. So he knew that pain.
Yeah, true.
It's in David Robinson's biography. You probably read it at the time, which was the BBC, which started in 1922. In 1925, they had a live broadcast. They went to the might have been the Savoy Cinema, but it was a short program called An Audience with Charlie Chaplin. And they went live to the cinema in the moment where it's the whole sequence with him on the sliding cabin floor.
Yeah, funny.
And so you could be sitting at home listening to the audience laughter of a film
that's so funny.
And they were confident enough to do this because they knew, well, okay, this is a really funny sequence, so we'll do a live broadcast called An Audience with Charlie Chaplin, and that's what they did in 1925. It's extraordinary, isn't it?
Wow.
No, it's great. It's really great.
And I was going to say, because the bread roll dance is also...
The bread roll dance is great. But it's all, you see all these influence from Fred Carnot and being from there, And the funny thing is, his brother Sidney could do all those routines really well and just as good as him.
Funny.
The only difference between my father and his brother Sidney is Sidney stayed in England because he was already famous at the time and stayed with Fred Carnot in England. And Charlie went touring in America and discovered the cinema. And that was he had his career, then exploded.
There was a quote from your dad at one point where he said, if I'd stayed in England, I wouldn't have been the success that I became by going to Hollywood. And I don't know whether you felt that was a class thing or whether it was a fact that our film industry wasn't as strong here.
I would say when he went to Hollywood, I mean, there's barely anything. There was sort of the land of opportunity for him, wasn't it? Yeah. The fact that he got to build his own studios and stuff, I guess in that aspect, something he would have never been able to do over here.
No, for sure. But I think what I think is very interesting is to see the influence of Fred Carnot and the training he had there. Had the same. You could see that Sidney was exactly the same, had the same talent.
Yeah.
In acting, anyhow.
Because in the couple of the home movies I've seen, when I visited Charlie's house there in Switzerland, Sidney seems to be much more of a playing up to the camera kind of guy.
Yeah.
And he seemed to bring out the best of that. And your father then would be encouraged to do the same kind of thing. But was your father how can I put this? Would you have known he was a comedian if you just met him privately at a party or something, or was he quiet about stuff?
I don't know. He was a quiet, like I like to say, he was a serious clown. like all clowns are. So at home he was very serious. He would read the paper, and when he became very funny, is like I remember many of times we were watching TV and he'd see something he didn't like, and suddenly he said, "Oh, this is terrible." He would start to stand up and he would imitate, and that's where you suddenly realize how funny he is. He had to get mad, and then then criticizing just like that, he would make a fool out of things, out of.
Because as they say, comedy is a serious business.
Exactly.
You can't be just constantly laughing at everything. mind you, I do.
Yeah, me
but
too.
then I'm not Charlie Chaplin, as history has proved.
Yeah. Okay. And all right, let's move on quickly to so some audience members sent in some questions. So let's have a look what there is. There's a couple of videos as well, actually. So we'll start with the easy ones, I guess.
Why
Okay.
can't we hear him talk? Is that one of them? Did he have a
Was he
lisp?
really born in black and white?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, so Rona wants to know, Dad, this one's for you. She's heard that a number of years ago that some of the family members were opposed to turning the house into a museum, and some were not opposed. Now that the museum has been open for a number of years, how does the family feel about the project now? Do they support it?
Of course, there's a majority of us who supported it anyhow, and everyone has had different. It's an emotional thing for us.
Yeah.
So you take it. Each individual takes it differently, but no, everyone agrees with it.
Yeah, well, I always thought about this because I grew up to a certain age there. You pretty much spent most of your life living there. So I'd imagine for you that it must have been quite a weird subject to think that it could be a museum.
To a point, like I like to say is, once you accept the fact that Chaplin belongs to the people, then you accept the fact of things like the museum and people coming into your house and visiting, and you have to, because if not, you get tortured for the rest of your life.
And I think also you haven't it's not like you've ripped the fabric of the house to bits.
No, not at all.
It still feels very much like a family home. It just happens to be open to people during the day.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We always wanted it to be Chaplin in Switzerland, showing the house showing Chaplin in Switzerland, and then the studios being about his films.
Yeah.
And the extension that's been built is where you can be a bit more. You can you can put sets and props and stuff in there, and there's a replica of the Gold Rush cabin in there, isn't there?
Exactly.
Yeah.
The extension, well, to me was the most difficult thing because they had to cut all the trees my mother planted.
Oh, really?
So I didn't want to be there when that happened.
No.
That's why I moved away from it all. But it's an emotional thing, and I can go around even in the house and saying, "Oh, well, this is not the same color." And
The whole house wasn't painted blue inside, was it?
Exactly. Yeah. But
It's all blue when you go through now.
Oh, is it? Right.
Yeah. Okay, so Paul, this is from Sarah Garland. She put, "Hello, Spencer, Eugene, and Paul." Hello, Sarah.
Yes, hello.
Are there any elements of Charlie in your surreal comedy, Paul?
Oh, no, I don't think so. I mean, I did a series with Channel 4 back in the early '90s that was a sketch show. So there were quite a few visual gags in there.
Yeah.
Because I've always had a fondness for, going back to what I was saying earlier about the difference between silent and sound comedy, I've always had a fondness for the visual gag, a good, funny visual gag. I think my favourite one this was quite a surreal one. It was a sort of, I was a member of the SAS, so we were in a sort of army uniform. And there was quite a few visual gags actually. The first thing you see me jumping out of an aeroplane, and I'm on a parachute, and I'm holding a stepladder. And the next shot is to see the stepladder drop to the ground, and then I land on the stepladder and just walk down to the ground on the stepladder. But the one that I really liked was that we had a paddling pool. We blew up a child's paddling pool, and we put it on the forest floor, and I jumped up in the air and went into the paddling pool and completely disappeared into it. Because what we did was we placed it over a 6-foot hole. So, and I disappeared completely. And then we cut to a country house with an ornamental pond outside. I emerged outside in the ornamental pond. And it worked really well because we showed the paddling pool being pumped up.
How funny.
You know, we showed it being put on the ground. Then we dug the hole. And of course, you know, you're just seeing the surface of the water. You don't know that it's that deep or that or whatever. So little things like that I would put in. You know, that's, I suppose, just the love of visual comedy, but there was no specific bit where I can say, oh, that was inspired by Charlie.
Yeah. I guess in the sense, if you're talking about, obviously, your work on Have I Got News for You, quite topical.
Yeah, and it's, you know, I mean, he was topical, of course, you know, with the shoulder arms and the Great Dictator, but it's, you can't really do visual comedy on that.
Yeah.
It's called not saying anything.
Yeah.
They'd stop paying me.
This is quite a good question for you, Dad. This is from Laura. She says, did Charlie realize what a profound impact he had on movies in general and how his comedy would live on forever?
Well, I don't think so. First, when he went back to Europe the first time and he saw the crowds waiting for him, he was the first one very surprised to see how successful he was. I guess later in years, maybe he did realize it, but he never said it.
Okay. Well, was it you that told me that? No, I think it was Kate from The Office when she was working there. She said that she seemed to think that he never really thought that his movies would go on so long, which is why they were never really. Well, they were stored, but they were not. I don't think he took actions to kind of restore them and keep them going for 1,000 years or whatever, because he didn't think it would last.
Well, he died before.
And I suppose it may be that thing of just thinking, well, they're silent films. You know, will there ever be any interest in silent films again?
But I think if he didn't think so, I think, you know, deep down inside himself, he was afraid to be forgotten. Mm-hmm. So he wanted the films to be a statement of what he did. That's why he kept all the negatives, all the nitrate negatives inside the house. Because no one wanted to keep them.
So there's this vault in the house, which you don't see in the museum, but you used to go in and there was just these films, reels everywhere, which was really interesting.
That's part of the theme of Limelight, isn't it? The comedian that's forgotten.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's very true, yeah.
And it's odd because I can't offhand think of another art form where for the first 30 years you have this huge success and then suddenly those 30 years seem to be redundant. You know, it's like sort of as if when stereo came in, nobody would play mono ever.
Exactly.
You know? It's bizarre, but what's happened in the last few years through the application of AI, as you mentioned earlier, and other sort of techniques to make films look as good as they ever did, there is a real resurgence of interest, you know, in these things. And I'm doing a film show up at Hebden Bridge in about next month, where we're going to be showing some stuff. And I've done a few things in the past, and they're very well attended. And people trying to persuade people to come along is the difficult thing. But once they've been, they will come again because they are amazed at how the best of these films are so good, are so funny still. That people, it's a revelation for people. So it's if you do see anyone listening to this, if you do see a silent film show near you, do go along because it'd be well worth it.
I also sorry to interrupt. Seeing a live orchestral screening of a silent film, I mean, it takes it to a whole new level.
Of course.
If you got a good orchestra, I don't think there's anything like it. I had a few friends come to the thing in Godalming Hall, and they'd never seen anything like it. They left; they were speechless almost. You know.
I think there was a quote from Charlie. He said something around about the time of City Lights, saying that like, the whole thing, it's the audience, it's a large audience, it's live music, it's symphonic sounds, it's the action on screen. The whole thing is an experience.
Yeah.
And you don't say that about modern cinema. You know, the thing about silent cinema, if you take your eyes off the screen for a moment, the film's gone. You know, so you have to concentrate on it. You have to watch what you're seeing. You have to be involved. You have to, you have to meet the film.
Yeah, for sure. Here, let me play you one of these videos.
Hello, Eugene Chaplin and Paul Merton. So my question is, what can we do to ensure that silent movies and the movies of Charlie Chaplin are not forgotten? So, currently Charlie Chaplin is very well known, but if I ask someone if they've seen one of his films or if they've just seen a silent film in general, then 90% of the time they will say no. And I know that some years ago, that silent films used to play on TV, especially during the day, quite a lot, but that never happens anymore. So I guess my question is a two-parter of, do you think that silent films are being forgotten and will be forgotten in years to come? And I guess if so, then what can we do to keep them alive and to ensure that people with names like Charlie Chaplin are remembered? Thank you.
Well, I think it goes back to what we were saying earlier. I mean, sort of film exhibition is the thing. Film exhibition is film preservation. It's all very well preserved in a film, but people have got to see it. And as you were just saying there about the screening of the modern times with the live orchestra, people are knocked out when they see this stuff. So it's about exhibiting. And if I can lend my name to something and people come because my name brings them in, it's the films that keep them there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that would be my answer. I don't know what you say.
No, I agree with you. I think it's just they have to be shown in cinemas on the big screen. No, I know people say, "Oh, we've seen it on TV before" or whatever, but it's not the same thing on the big screen. Is the important thing.
A big screen with an audience. I mean, sometimes you can look at this stuff on YouTube. I mean, it's not. Don't do that. Just don't do it.
No, it's a terrible thing because the attention of the young kids now. If I say to them, "Have you seen The Gold Rush?" They said, "Oh yes, loved it." I said, "Well, come sit down. Let's watch it again." And once they see it again, they said, "Oh, I never realized it was that good."
Yes.
Yeah.
And you say, "Why?" It's because I saw just the bits on YouTube.
Yeah, exactly. You have to sort of, you have to experience it. The best way to experience it is with a live audience on a big screen, sympathetic presentation. Maybe somebody giving you a bit of background information before the film starts or whatever. But yeah, that's how you keep it alive essentially.
Yeah.
By making it by keeping it as a live experience.
Yeah. How important is it for you to try and keep this silent movie era?
Oh, it's great because I mean, when I was growing up, as I mentioned earlier at the top of the talk, when I was about 13, 14, I used to collect this stuff. And the kids in the class at school were talking about David Bowie, and so. Charlie Chaplin was not something that was, although they did show Chaplin films, the mutual films were shown on TV, and I think in the late mid-70s, something like that. But yeah, it's to have this passion that I had, which I wasn't sharing with anybody. Now, if I go in front of an audience, and at Hebden Bridge, it's a beautiful cinema built in 1921, 400-seater. There'll be 400 people there, and I'll be able to say, at last, I'm not a nerd.
So true.
So I can, I can give them a bit of background information on stuff, and they can appreciate what it is. So it's great that the sort of my passion for it. I meet like-minded people. I remember one of the first times I did one of these. I remember saying to the audience, "This is the first time I've been able to tell anybody about this stuff that I know."
How funny. All right, here's video number 2.
Hello, Eugene Chaplin. I would like to know what were Charlie Chaplin's impressions. General impressions after making The Gold Rush. Thank you. Bye.
I don't know because it was before my time.
Yes.
I mean, as Paul mentioned before. I mean, he said it was his greatest achievement at the time, I guess.
I mean, it was a huge success, and I think, like any artist, he would have been greatly thrilled by its success, but also by the judgment of his peers as well. I mean, who absolutely loved it. There's a quote from Buster Keaton who's described as one of the greatest films ever made, and which I've read, but I've not been able to source it. But I have seen it somewhere where he said that.
Look it up.
And there was a sort of when I went to LA a few years ago, I was immensely charmed by the fact that Charlie's house and Buster's house were very close to each other. They were only like a 10-minute walk between the two of them, and you can certainly see Charlie's influences on Buster. The impact of the Gold Rush led to a more emotional content in some of Keaton's films. And I think that was something at the of the time where all the major comedians would sometimes, like Harold Lloyd's Safety Last, climbing up the building. That then led to Charlie and the Gold Rush doing the stuff with this slanted things. They're at a height, but they never. It wasn't a question of copying. It was a question of taking the idea and personalising it the way they would do it.
Yeah.
And so Charlie's cabin is on the edge of a precipice, but he's also not just doing a height thing, he's also doing an angle thing. So he's sliding backwards and forwards. So that's his way of doing it. And I think maybe even an improvement on the original. But none of them were working in a vacuum. A bit like we mentioned the Beatles earlier. In the 60s, Bob Dylan, Beach Boys, Beatles, Rolling Stones, somebody does something, somebody over here does something else. The sitar appears in one record and it appears in another. There is that kind of thing where people are looking at each other and being inspired by each other. And I think certainly the Gold Rush in its day, when it first was released, was held as a masterpiece, which it still is. So I think, again, it's all speculation, but he must have been thrilled by the impact of it.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
I'm a massive fan of the podcast Chaplin Talks, and I'd really like to know, what was it like when they filmed Chaplin at your home? Do you have any stories of Robert Downey Jr., Anthony Hopkins, Richard Attenborough, Ira Kelly? Thank you very much.
Well, I remember very well when Richard Attenborough came over with his film crew, which was a small crew.
Was it?
That's what they said, but there's about, 30, 35 people coming in. There's two things that really impressed me. Is first the kindness and the politeness of Richard Attenborough. He knew everyone by their own name. And there's a scene where my mother's butler, Mario, just comes on and pours some tea or coffee on the terrace to Robert Downey Jr. and all. And when he did the scene and all, Richard Attenborough, you'd hear he scream out, "Thank you, Mario, that was great." And I thought that was so nice, because you always have this image of people screaming at each other and whatever. And one story I like to tell, which is true, is it was one day there was going to be shooting on the terrace, and it was very cloudy, and they're announcing rain. And he got the whole cast and the crew together, holding hands and all. And he did like a prayer. I promise you, suddenly the clouds opened and the sun came out, and they could shoot the film.
How funny!
Yeah,
I've got a very quick Richard Attenborough story, which sounds like I'm being big-headed, but I think it's got a quite good ending. I met him once, and he said to me, what he said to me started off as a compliment and ended up somewhere else, and I had to sort of change the expression on my face, because he said, "You have made me pee myself with laughter." Mind you, I have got diabetes.
Really?
So you go, oh,
that's
one
great.
of the strangest things anyone's ever said to me.
That's a great compliment. Actually, a very good compliment.
Yes, yeah.
What did you, Paul? What do you think of the movie Chaplin?
Well, when you try and make a film about a famous comedian, it's very difficult to capture the funniness of that person. And I think that's where I seem to remember, it's a long time since I saw it. I probably saw it when it first came out. I remember being impressed by Robert Downey Jr.'s performance in terms of he seemed to capture something of the man as much as I might imagine he was like. Mm-hmm. But I think the funniness was something that was missing, because you can't really get that. It's sort of, they've tried over the years. Geoffrey Rush played Peter Sellers. Rod Steiger, unbelievably, was W.C. Fields in a film in the early 70s. And for me, it never captured the comedy of the man, because it can't, because Charlie Chaplin was Charlie Chaplin. He was just a supreme performer, creator of comedy, and that's difficult to replicate.
Yeah.
But I remember sort of enjoying the film. I mean, I this is a bit off the point, but I hated the Stan and Ollie film.
Oh, did you? I actually quite enjoyed it.
Well, I know the history a great deal.
Yeah.
If you don't know the history, I think it's a good film.
Okay.
But if that's why I've spoken to speakers. Yeah, I enjoyed it. there were just bits in it where you go, no. That's maybe you shouldn't worry about historical accuracy.
He would be drinking water from his right hand, not his left hand.
No, it's things like right at the beginning of the film, Stan Laurel says, I want to have independence like Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton. I want to make that. Buster Keaton never had any independence. He was, that was wrong. A scene where, this has nothing to do with the podcast. Okay, well,
no, it's good. It's good to know. I like to hear.
A scene where Stan decides to go on with somebody else because Ollie's not very well.
Yeah.
That never happened.
Oh, it didn't happen?
No, never happened. And also the thing of them having an argument, they never argued. Because essentially Stan was the sort of like he'd worked with the director, he worked with the gag men, he was one of them himself. Ollie said, look, tell me what time you want me to be at the studio. I want to finish by 4 so I can have a round of golf. There was never any conflict of interest. It wasn't like Ollie wanted to be the director, or occasionally he might come up with an idea, but essentially he left it to them.
Yeah.
So they had a very, very, equitable relationship. They never argued. And so suddenly you've got this argument scene, and the next day, did you mean what you said yesterday? No, I didn't. Oh, right. So I'm afraid for me, people like me who have studied that era.
Yeah, I can understand that.
But other people loved it. So
but I think as well, when you do a film like Gandhi, you don't see, there's not that many images of Gandhi you've seen before. Well, I didn't.
Yeah.
So you can believe that this guy is Gandhi.
Yeah, okay, I see.
And the whole thing, yeah. Well, when you do Chaplin and The Little Tramp has been in people's homes through TV and through all things like that.
Yeah.
So suddenly you get Robert Downey to play The Little Tramp. You just see it's not him.
Yes, that's it. That's the thing. It's very difficult to capture the comedic brilliance.
You said to me about the Chaplin film, correct me if I'm wrong, that you wish they focused more on his actual work than the personal life aspects, no?
Did I say that? To me, the criticism I have about the film is that the first half is so interesting because you're talking about the beginning of film business and how Hollywood has been there and everything. But he didn't have enough time to go in depth with that.
No,
so it suddenly cuts off and you go into the next part.
Too much happened in his life to fit it into a movie.
88 years and 2 hours. It's difficult.
All right, so Paul, anything you want to share with what you got going on at the moment, or?
We're doing a show at the Comedy Store at the moment every Wednesday, an improv show, myself and Suki. That's running for another sort of 5 weeks or so.
Nice.
But that's doing very well.
Sure. You've got, is it David Tennant on one of them?
David Tennant's on, as we speak now, he's on Wednesday. We have David Mitchell, who's never done it before. We have Stephen Mangan. We have Julian Clary. We have
amazing.
A lot of people.
What's the idea? Is it all improvisational?
It's all improvisation. So myself and Suki, we bring guests on. David Tennant at the moment is very nervous about it. But he's going to do it, so good on him. David Mitchell was quite nervous about it. I sent him a long email persuading him because he said, I can't do this. And I said, well, you do it on television all the time. You improvise, but you're not thinking about it being improvised. You're just saying stuff off the top of your head. But it's all funny. And so I sent him an email saying, look, not only is there no parachute, but there's no plane. You're on the ground. Don't worry. It's going to be fine. And I think that's the thing. That people have never done it before get very nervous, but then halfway through it, they get such a buzz from it because they go, this is great. That's what I strongly suspect will happen with the two Davids.
Okay. Ease into it.
Fun.
All right. Well, guys, look, thank you so much, Paul. Thank you so much. And it was a real pleasure having you here.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you. And it's great to hear that the Gold Rush is being sort of like polished up to a pristine condition. So when's that coming out? Do you know?
Well, they're working on it literally as we speak.
Are they? Right.
So
it's coming out very soon.
It'll be sooner. I'm hoping to actually go over there and film some of the process.
Right. Yes.
Which would be great to see.
Yeah, because it is extraordinary what they can do these days in cleaning up images. It's fantastic. It's I can't wait. Yeah. Maybe I think the premiere was sometime in June or something. Maybe they're going to sort of go for that. Maybe the 100th anniversary or something.
That's
maybe.
Right.
Yeah. Brilliant.
All right. Well, thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank
you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.